Okay, so the state of media criticism in this country is a disaster. It's a total disaster. And for the longest time, there is really only one place to go for media criticism, and that is Canadaland. And so this is gonna be I'm gonna be shitting on Canadaland. And I don't actually do this very comfortably because I owe a lot to Canadaland, especially the show that I'm going to be talking about, which is Shortcuts. Shortcuts is supposed to be the show on media criticism, and a lot of you know who I am thanks to my time being on Shortcuts many times over the last many years. I've always had great feedback about being on Shortcuts, but since October 7th, something has happened. The show really has completely dropped the ball on the kind of media criticism that we actually need right now. Okay, so yes, I'm doing a trash talking video on Canadaland Shortcuts, and I don't know, maybe I'll be back on someday. I'm not opposed to the show, but certainly Jesse Brown, who's the host of the show and the publisher of Canadaland, has a lot to answer for, I think, actually, to be taken seriously, to be able to do media criticism again. So why am I targeting Shortcuts? As I say, there's very few places in Canada that actually do media criticism. As much as I want people to listen to Sandy and Nora, my own podcast, where we do media criticism, I mean, it is just Sandy and I. If you look at any episode of Shortcuts, there's like credits, right? People that actually do the sound engineering, the production, the chasing of guests. There's a guest, right? Sandy, Nora, the credits are Sandy and Nora. Like, unless we get script support, all of the sound design, audio production, editing, it's all me. It's all me. And I don't actually get a salary from it. So like we can't compete. We really can't do that kind of work. Outside of Shortcuts, there really is nothing, because criticism in Canada is basically not allowed, right? Literary criticism basically doesn't exist. If you are a Globe and Mail employed journalist, you'll probably get your books reviewed by the Globe and Mail. Otherwise, good freaking luck. Even the reviews are not literary criticism at all. There usually is just like, this is what happens in the book. You should read it. It's really good, right? There's no actual criticism. And so Shortcuts is one of the very few spaces in Canada where there is a way to engage with what is wrong with the world and what is wrong with literary criticism, with the way media actually, does its thing. And so I've been really like waiting for Shortcuts. I mean, not actually, because I know what Jesse's opinion is on October 7th and on the siege of Gaza and on how incapable he's been to remove his own thinking and opinions on this stuff and actually look at what is happening in media as a result. But I have been kind of hoping that Shortcuts would be able to take on some of these issues. And they haven't been able to touch almost at all the biggest questions happening in Canadian journalism and in Canadian politics, which is, where is the coverage when our leaders, I guess, go to the Middle East? Where is the coverage of Canadian journalists being in the Middle East? I mean, there are some situations where journalists are going, sometimes. I know Adrian Arsenault, I believe, is in Jordan looking at, humanitarian aid drops. But like, by and large, the press coverage on everything from the fact that, well, there's been no press coverage on the fact that Palestinians in Canada are suing the government. There's been very little sober press coverage on what's actually happening outside, like when people are protesting synagogues. I've seen a single report that actually dove into the legality of what was happening inside of these real estate events within synagogues that are selling West Bank land or trying to sell West Bank land. Complete violation of international law, even a complete violation of what Canada considers to be just or whatever, right? The only report we saw from that was from Pivot, which is an independent francophone publication in Montreal. And then we have two ministers that have had trips there with almost no coverage. So you had Ahmed Hussein, the international development minister, go to the Rafah border crossing at a time where Canada is promising to get people out of Gaza through that border crossing and into Egypt so that they can do all the rest of the application that they have to do to be able to come to Canada. And I'm not sure I saw any media coverage on that. If there was, I mean, maybe there was a tiny, tiny bit, but I mean, that seems kind of notable, right? Right on the other side of that wall, right on the other side of the wall where Hussein himself filmed, because they know that there's no journalists there. They know that they can actually control the message wholly in what they're doing. And in his own video, he's outside of this border crossing, the gates to an ongoing campaign of ethnic cleansing, and it's nowhere in the press. Then last week, you have Melanie Joly, who does the same thing. She goes to Israel. She's shaking hands with all of these architects of ethnic cleansing. And the only thing we get is her line, the line of her as the minister and the line of Global Affairs Canada or the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Then she goes to the West Bank. She does the exact same thing. She tries to play both sides. She's giving the same amount of money to both sides. We love both sides. Both sides are bad. Both sides are good. Both sides are killing people. Both sides aren't killing people, and all this kind of bullshit. And there's no media coverage. In fact, I think I did see Politico write about this in their daily newsletter, and I think they called it like her mysterious tour or something like this. Like, what is going on in Canadian journalism? It seems like the only way that we can actually talk about Gaza is if it's like put on a silver platter and handed to journalists. So, for example, the debate that happened last night where the NDP brings forward a motion and that is the reason to have the conversation. Now, I highly doubt Shortcuts this week is going to talk about the way media coverage looked at that debate, right? Were there any Palestinians actually interviewed? I certainly saw nothing. I saw way more of what Melissa Lantzman lying about babies put in ovens, which is like a lie that has been fully debunked. Her saying ridiculous things about Israel more in the Canadian press, not the Canadian press, but the press in Canada, than I saw any Palestinians quoted about why it is so necessary that Canada declare Palestine a state. Or what does that mean if there's a two-state solution? Does Palestine have to be considered a state under a two-state solution? And if the two-state solution is Canada's current position, why did the Liberals go so hard to get rid of recognizing Palestine as a state? Isn't that half the two-state solution? Like, can somebody help me here? Can a journalist tell me what the hell is going on? Because this doesn't actually make any sense. And so we did get the journalism of the back and forth of watching the debates. I saw certainly, Kate McKenna from CBC and Chelsea Nash was reporting live. I saw Evan Dyer have, an analysis piece of this stuff. But it's like, guys, this is the biggest issue actually happening in the world right now. This is the biggest issue that is happening in the world right now. There have been more children killed in Gaza than all other wars combined in the last 5 years, in 5 months. And Canada is directly involved, both through our exports, our military exports, which we know are the highest they have been to Israel. Sure, the motion last night is saying that maybe the Liberals will be encouraged to stop this non-binding motion, but already has happened. Like, let's not forget the past, which is just the last 5 months. And again, this news was broken by the Maple. So, here, once again, we do not have mainstream media doing much coverage at all of the kind that Canadians need. And of course, it's pushing Canadians to read everything from, Al Jazeera to the Times of Israel to AP and Reuters and all of these other, international sources that don't actually give a Canadian perspective on this stuff. When the Liberals insist that the NDP add to their motion that Hamas be demilitarized, have their weapons taken away, as if this is something Canada has any control over at all. And then, not to mention, does it make sense to demilitarize the side that is literally experiencing the ethnic cleansing right now? We need journalists to explain this. And it hasn't come up on Shortcuts at all. But what has come up on Shortcuts? I went through the last episode since the beginning of the year, and I'm going to read the list to you. And it's like, here it is. So just for laughs, no one cares, not a question of media criticism. Princess conspiracy. Nobody cares, maybe a question of media criticism. COVID lab leak, really interesting. Vice going under, yes. Online harms bill, okay. Those are all media issues. Rob Oliphant considers quitting. Okay, that's, I guess Palestine adjacent, that's the closest we can get, okay. Local journalism initiative money, Bell Media, Polyever, and the CBC, and the CP, and the Canadian Press, all media stuff. Selena Robinson, okay, the NDP cabinet minister who said that, there was nothing in Palestine when Israel was formed, and so who the hell cares? All right, transphobia in Alberta. The Edmonton City Hall shooter, which Jesse made a big point of pointing out was a part of some sort of conspiracy to not ever challenge or criticize Palestinian protesters because this guy mentioned his concerns about Gaza in a laundry list of reasons why he went to shoot up Edmonton City Hall. And that there was, as the Jesse, and I forget who the co-host was, saying this is part of a conspiracy to not talk about these things, even though it was actually in all the national news. It just, the stories weren't very good, but it actually was covered. But okay. AI and Taylor Swift, international students, CBSA and jailing migrants, Donald Trump. I don't know what this was. I didn't listen to this episode. Celebrity chef Mary Berg, anti-Semitism in the media. Okay. And Trudeau's vacation. So those are all of the topics on media criticism at Shortcuts in the last 6 weeks or whatever, since the beginning of 2024. Guys, what are you doing? Like, what are you... I mean, Jesse, if you can't handle this stuff, then hand it over to Goldsby or hand it over to someone else. Hand it over to Karen Palazzi, who's the editor-in-chief. Because we need Canadian media criticism right now. And I don't care what you think about Israel's right to do ethnic cleansing. And I don't mean you, Jesse, necessarily. I mean you, anybody. I don't care about one person's position on that. If you are in the game to criticize the media, there has been no shortage of things to talk about in the last 5 months. No shortage. And in fact, we are desperately in need of it. And I wrote an article last week because 3 weeks earlier, I was like, we heard nothing about the process for people to bring their family from Gaza to Canada. We heard that nonstop during the decision to bring Syrians to Canada. We heard it a lot when Canadian government decided to bring Afghans to Canada. And we heard it a lot, of course, when Ukrainians came to Canada. But in this case, like nothing. We've heard nothing. And, you hear the rumors of people and people don't know what's going on. And people are desperate to, get their family members out because every single day is a new massacre and is a new number of people starving to death. And there was nothing. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll write this article. And at the same time that I wrote it, so did the Canadian press. I don't know what triggered them to write it. I know it triggered me to write it. It was a personal thing, but we had the exact same, we're on the same timeline, I guess. I don't know. Jeremy Appel also has a very good piece at The Orchard, his Substack, on his reporting on this. But by and large, there's been nothing. And even that Canadian press article didn't get picked up by any other publications. Like there was no the Toronto Star going up and following up on this, or the CBC following up on this. It was like, here's the information. Now, Mark Miller has just announced yesterday, in advance of that big motion from the NDP, that they will be increasing the number of people that can come from Gaza from 1,000 people, which is a huge victory, a huge, great news piece of information. But again, on the media criticism side of this, why do we not know what Canada has negotiated with Israel to get people out? Has Canada negotiated with Israel to get people out? Can we even get people out? Why are there so many people sitting in Egypt right now who can come tomorrow, who had all of their fucking documents signed, their biometrics submitted, they're out, they're in Egypt, they're waiting. What is the delay? Because there are 12 people who've been approved. I suspect that those 12 people are actually like completely random. And so they all have family members that can't leave. And so that is what's stopping them from leaving, is they need other approvals. Because in my reporting, I talked to a lot of people who had like 5 family members, and every single family member was at a different stage of the process. They all applied at the same time, but they were all at a different stage in the process. And I suspect that's probably why no one has been able to come to Canada yet. Because, the mother of family is not going to leave her kids while the process is still going on, even if she's completely green-lighted and can come. The stakes are really, really high in this. And Canada's media doesn't function at the best of times. Like, the National Newspaper Awards just nominated their 3 best columnists, and one is a liberal whose columns are extremely boring, but they're just plentiful. And one is a complete dangerous piece of shit that is on a holy war to try and make more people die from toxic drugs. I mean, and the third is Negan Sinclair. Negan, I hope you win. It is really stunning, and we need media criticism more than ever. And so, Jesse, I'm begging you, do media criticism again, or get out of the industry entirely, because you're taking up some space, and the space that you're taking up is actually really, really important. And not many of us have the kind of capital that you have. Not many of us have a media company. Not many of us have employees. You're the one that has all that stuff. And unless you're actually doing the mission that you've promised people to do with this show, then you're doing a disservice. You're taking up space and not doing what we need for you to do right now. And I mean, sure, I also could say fuck shortcuts. It's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. It's actually probably just going to get worse as these things continue on. And that's possibly true, for sure. If that's true, and then, then we got to look for those independent media folks like Jeremy Appel, like The Maple, like The Breach, like The Hoser in Toronto, lots of really great indie and small papers and small media groups doing what they can. But on media criticism, I mean, it's a really small pool of people. And as someone who's in that pool and who does not have access to the resources that I wish that I had access to, come on, man. Come on. Please take my advice. I don't know. Give your show to someone. That's all I got.